So I'm Batya Novick, founder of Kala Collective and a therapist specializing in reproductive mental health. For those of you who are new to us, Kala Collective is a curated network of licensed therapists who are true experts in the field of reproductive mental health, dedicated to the complex experiences that we face throughout the process of family building. I'm absolutely thrilled to be speaking with Aly Teich, who's been sharing her fertility story on social media and has been having this incredible impact touching so many people. Thanks for joining us, Aly.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so
Yeah.
excited to be having this conversation.
Yeah, it's an important one. I mean, and I'm excited. This is in honor of Infertility Awareness Week. I think it's so important that we get to deep dive into your story, into my work as a therapist in this field, and the impact that our stories make in helping others, but also helping ourselves in processing this kind of experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's about time, right? Like I feel like it has slowly started to build. Like I shared my story when I first did egg freezing in my 30s, which we'll get to. And I feel like I really was like one of the first people to talk about that journey. And then now that I'm in sort of phase two of IVF and starting to share my journey, it's wonderful to see how many people are out there sharing their stories, but yet I can see just from the response and me telling my story how hungry people are to have access to someone else who's going through it too and still feeling very alone. So we clearly still have a long way to go of, giving people access to other people who are going through it, but also taking down some of those barriers and the taboo around speaking about this, so women don't have to feel like they have to hold their stories alone.
I mean, I think that's so true. I think even to your point today, where we're talking about this so much more, yet anyone going through it has the same experience over and over. We see this as therapists, where people are saying, I feel so all alone in this. My friends, my family, maybe they mean well, but they're not saying the right thing. I feel like I'm going through this and everybody else is just like having 1,000 babies, drinking
Yeah.
a glass of wine, getting pregnant. And and so I think as much as we've come so far, we've got so much further to go in
So
making this
much further.
such a normalized experience for people.
Yes. Especially as more and more women are choosing to have children later,
Right.
or made life decisions that then landed them in a spot where they're having children later.
That's right.
And also, as there's so many more options around it. But yes, I agree. Because even like, I feel so lucky in sharing my story. Look, I now have access to you as a beautiful therapist. I have a therapist. I have a massive network of women that I'm in touch with who are going through it, have been through it. But still, there are times that I feel isolated in my own closer life, um, because the people in my closest circle, whether it be relatives or some of my best friends, I'm one of the first to really go through this journey. So even one of my best friends, in the most well-intentioned way, reached out this week and was like, I hope you're having a lot of sex. And she has three children, had them in her 20s.
Right.
Wonderful. Um, but it was what, and it, again, so well intentioned, but it actually was quite triggering for me because I was like, it's you don't get it. I love you, but you don't get it. And it's I wish it were that simple. And maybe it will be. Maybe we're trying right now. Maybe it will be. But the chances are it won't be. And to it just felt like she wasn't,
She
not in a
didn't
bad
get
way.
it. Like you said,
You
she
can't get it
wants
unless you're
that.
going through it. You just can't.
You
There are
can't.
many moments in life and many parts of life that you just can't understand unless you've been through it. And this is 100% one of them.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, you brought up so many points just now. I mean, something we see a lot of as therapists are people saying, people don't get it. They don't, and we always say, or my friends aren't showing up for me the way I need them to. And I always say, well, maybe they all can't, right? When we have these hard moments, you're gonna have your friends or family members who are great to make you laugh, great when you're like, I need to go out and have fun and get distracted. But maybe there's that one or two people that can actually hold it. But then we need to tell them what we need because to your point, they don't know, they haven't gone through it. And then that's where our stories really come in because we get to share our stories with other people and because we get it, we understand, we've like lived it, we're walking it.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's such incredible advice, and something that that I've leaned into before, but I'm gonna lean further into of like identifying those key people for you who are going to be your support people, even if you have wider, like who are those go-to people, but letting them know that, letting them know, like, I just want you to know if it's okay with you, you're going to be one of my go-to people. Here's what would be really supportive for me. Hopefully, they're actually going to be someone who has been through it, because I do believe that's going to be um, your strongest support, but maybe they haven't, and just and really it's vulnerable to ask for help, but you need to ask for help in these
You
moments.
can't do it alone. You
No.
can't. And I think if you don't, I mean, I think it's incredible if you have somebody that can walk with you through it, who's lived it. But if you don't, it could just be that person that's good for a cry, good for a stress. And to your point, just be like, the tips we say is like, don't try to fix it for anyone. Don't try to like solve the problems. Just be there, hold space. I love you. How are you doing? Is there
A
anything I
hundred
can do to
percent.
support you? I mean, if anyone could fix this, we would have solved the problem.
I'm like, can you introduce me to that person?
I know it's like, here.
Yeah, don't try to fix it. And I also think a big one, and I wonder if you come across this a lot too, is the most well-intentioned but unsolicited advice. It's like if you're going to give advice, and we're about to give a whole bunch of advice, but I hope people who are watching it because they're seeking that.
Right.
So let's just say we're asking permission. Would you like our advice? But before you just throw advice at someone, take that moment to just pause for a second, or even just ask, would you like my advice? And if they say, I don't really need advice right now, just respect that.
Because when I mean, talk a little bit about as you've gone through this, how have you felt in your experience where advice isn't helpful? Kind of talk a little bit from your story angle in that way.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about my overall story or just this?
Yeah, maybe. Okay, so
Yeah,
as
because we
you
have, I know, we jumped right in. I love it. I love how we just jump
we
right
went
in.
off.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about your fertility story so far, and what are those key moments or turning points along the way that made an impact?
Absolutely. So I would say I'm in phase two of who knows how many phases it's going to be of my fertility journey. So I'm now 43 and actively going through IVF, which I will speak to in a minute. But phase one of my fertility journey was freezing my eggs in my late 30s. So I did two rounds of egg freezing, one when I was 37, and then one when I was 39. There
Can
was
I
a bit of,
ask you a question there? Oops.
yes, yeah.
So, what made you freeze your eggs? What was the impetus for that? Because I think that's really important, and I think that piece of it is something
Yeah.
that people need to hear.
Yeah, and it's why I separate these things out because they're, even though physically it's so much of the same, um, it's so much of the same experience, emotionally, it is completely different. It's just distinct. So I was like a great serial monogamist until about 33 and had a major break. I had a lot of life happen when I was 33. My mom died from ovarian cancer after 5 years of a battle. And then shortly after that, I went through a major breakup with a guy who I was like, this is the guy. Um, So everything sort of crumbled and I had to rebuild. And I was 33 and I was like, oh my God, what about babies? What about all of this? And my OB at the time, who is now retired, otherwise I would tell you all to go to her if you live in New York. Um, I went to her and hysterically crying in the office. I was like, oh, what do I do about kids? And she's like, you know what? You have enough going on in your life. You're 33. Let's not even think about this until you're 35. We'll revisit it at 35 because 35 is when it starts to matter when it comes to egg health. We know that egg health starts to decline earlier than that, but I think she had a wonderful awareness of like you have enough going on here right now. Get through mom dying and breakup.
Because you come first no matter what, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's something you and I will talk about, that even through these moments, you can't sacrifice all of yourself.
You can't. And also look, stress, we're always going to be stressed. There's always going to be stress in life. If you have figured out how to not have stress, call me. I want to know. But that going through such an extreme stressful moment of grief was just not going to be a good time to go through what you have to go through to freeze your eggs anyway. So if you're also in a moment where like there's just too much life happening to pile this onto, um, it is also a lot. So to fast forward at 35, she was like, "Okay, you want to have babies?" And I dragged my feet. I dragged my feet for about 2 years because I think a lot of the emotions at that time was like, no, I for me it felt like if I was going to take the step to freeze my eggs, somehow I was giving in to this other path of life that felt like a failure compared to where I thought I was going to be of meeting someone and starting a family. And if I was going to take this step to go freeze my eggs, that meant something had gone wrong. And I was resistant to it because I didn't want to give in to like, oh my gosh, I'm here where I have to freeze my eggs. And I wish I could go back, I mean, on so many levels and talk to that former version of myself and be like, oh my goodness, this is just the absolute opposite of that. This is just setting your future self up for success. And it's just a beautiful proactive thing and is they're just separate. So finally at 37, I think it was because there was a new clinic, Kind Body, that reached out to me. I got connected to them somehow, and we decided that we were going to do a partnership together, and I was going to share my journey. And I think a bunch of friends were starting to do it at that point, and it was clear that time was up. I needed to do it. And I think I was more comfortable on many levels. I think I had settled into like I'm good being in my late 30s and single, and I think I hadn't been there yet. I think financially I was ready to pay for it. So there was a lot of factors that I sort of had to be in that right place for it with myself.
And I think even that is an area of shift and change where so many companies now so many insurance companies are covering egg freezing, which is incredible. So for so many people, if they have fertility benefits, oftentimes they have egg preservation and fertility preservation benefits, which is incredible. But I think you said something that was so important, which is so many times when women are freezing their eggs, it's like this failure association. I shouldn't be doing this. I should just be meeting the person I'm supposed to be built making babies with, not freezing eggs, when really maybe you won't use them, maybe you will, but this is just something you do for yourself so that you meet that person when it's the right time to meet that person. And like, what a
What
gift.
a gift. It is, if I could go back and tell myself, it is the gift of time. It's the gift of time. And like now that I'm here at 43 and we can talk about I have an embryo from those eggs. So I'm so grateful I did it. I wish I had done more. I wish I had done it sooner. It's not a failure. It's an investment in yourself and it's an investment in your future relationship. And it takes the pressure. For me, it was like once that was done, I actually even approached finding a partner very differently. I was in a different place with myself. It was very empowering. And I wish I could go back and have gotten there sooner. So for anyone else out there that like it is the opposite of a failure. And like if you're in your 30s and single, yeah, it's tough and dating's tough and meeting someone's tough. And if you're probably a career woman and you're doing all these things and kicking ass and like take this off the table. Go get those eggs, put them away, and then you can like have all the time you need to meet Mr. Right and travel the
And
world and do all the things and
and be the other pieces of yourself, right? Like having
yes,
a family is amazing and wonderful, but it's not everything. And when it gets hard, it feels like everything. It feels
yeah,
like it's 100% what we are. Work dims down, relationships dims down, and that story becomes everything. And when you can freeze your eggs, and when you, especially if you have that option through your employer where you don't have to pay or not a lot,
yeah,
it's the gift of even if you find that person right away and you have a surprise of fertility struggles, then you just have extra buffers to
exactly.
just make it less stressful. And to your point, dating just becomes something a little differently. I'm in New York, you're in California. The dating
I
scene,
was in New York. Yeah.
wild.
Wild. Wild. I mean, that's a whole other
Right,
conversation.
a different talk.
But yeah, I really, because I was there, I really feel for women who are needing to make that decision, but like cannot encourage it more. I would have done it sooner and I would have done more of it. So if you can do it, do it. You will not regret it. So that was phase one for me. I actually didn't have I had a fine outcome. It wasn't great. I got 5 in my first round, 9 in my second. So I had 14 eggs. Now in phase two, my now husband and I, fertilized those 14 eggs and we got one healthy embryo from it. So I'm so
Oh,
grateful because that's like our little angel embryo sitting there. Um, but for many reasons. One, that I would love the option to have more than one kid, and also because implantation oftentimes doesn't stick. We are trying to make more embryos as insurance. And because I'm 43, I am the clock I'm up against is my egg quality and my egg quantity. Carrying is not as much of a rush, right?
okay.
So the focus right now is to get the good eggs that I have and use them and try and fertilize them and try and get as many embryos as we can, and trying naturally in between because you do one cycle on, one cycle off, so we can chat about that. Um, so I did my first round of phase two egg retrieval, and unfortunately, it was not successful. So we only retrieved 3 eggs, and one of those, 2 of them, um, were fertilized. One made it to be an embryo, but it was not viable for anything. So I am now in the in between, waiting to go into my second round of trying again.
And what was that like? For folks who have not done IVF, it's really 2 weeks of incredible hormone stimulation where you're injecting yourself. You're going to the doctor sometimes at like 7, 8 a.m. every day or every other day. It's a lot of work. And we imagine that we're going to get the outcome we want. And yet we don't know. And I think some of the doctors we work with say this very wise thing, which is the first time you do IVF, we're not just trying to get you the great outcomes, but we're also learning about your body. So it might work, but it might not work because we don't know how your individual body is going to respond to all of this. So sometimes it doesn't go the way we hoped it would the first time around. And it's a learning opportunity that maybe the physicians can say, oh, you know what, let's stimulate your ovaries this way versus that way. But regardless, it can just feel like I worked so hard. I did all the things I was supposed to do, and I didn't get the outcomes. And what was that experience like for you? And how did you get to the other side?
It was really hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard. It was I had a first moment with it when I found out I only retrieved 3 eggs. So for anyone who hasn't been through it, you go through these weeks, or for me, it was weeks shooting myself up. I was on something called a Lupron protocol, which is very challenging. So anyone out there who's going to go through Lupron, reach out. Happy to talk to you.
It's
But
the low and slow.
low and
We're
slow. But
gently stimulating egg and follicle growth. So for some people, it's 2 weeks or a little less. But
yeah,
for Lupron and those estrogen priming protocols, yeah, it's longer and
it
it's
was a
slow.
full month for me. Yeah.
Oh,
And I did not, I had a really tough time with it. Like I remember with my previous rounds, I did a different protocol and like, I was okay. I was like maybe a little weepy. I had my little like ovary tummy, which I kind of was into. And this one really got the better of me emotionally and physically. So then to come out of that and you're getting these ultrasounds throughout that are tracking how you're doing. And at the beginning, it really looked like I was not tracking for much. And then some of them seemed to catch up. So we got to a point where it went from like, ooh, maybe 2 to like, oh, maybe like 7.
mhm.
So I went into that retrieval feeling really hopeful. Um, and this is where I just encourage all the practitioners out there, if you're hearing this story, I know you guys do such a delicate balance of how you set expectations, but no one explained to me that you could have more follicles growing than eggs retrieved. So you wake up from anesthesia, and essentially the first thing they tell you is how many eggs um, you got. So it was kind of like, get
Yep,
up,
yep.
you got 3. And I was destroyed because it really, the expectation of what I thought versus what I got was a really tough moment. Um, and then yeah, and then we found out that too. So we knew we were starting in a not great place, but had ever look, you could get 3 eggs and get 3 embryos. You can get 3 eggs and get 0 embryos and everything in between. So we were doing our best to prepare for that. Um, we knew that 2 had fertilized, and then we were kind of waiting. It's a lot of waiting, a lot of uncertainty, and then we got the call that none were viable. And it took a minute. It was a Friday morning. I had to make it through work.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like
You put your work
I
hat
put my pants
on.
on. I had to keep existing in the world.
Yeah, right.
And it was that afternoon that it all came crashing down. And yeah, it was all the emotions. It was all the emotions from um, just really feeling like I think I felt robbed in a way for everything that I put my body through to have nothing to show for it. I think there's a lot of feelings of failure because you're also, at least I am, putting in so much work. It's like another full-time job to try and improve my fertility, improve my egg health. So I go to acupuncture 1 to 3 times a week, depending on where I am in my cycle. I'm taking herbs, like I'm taking drink these gross teas every night. I'm taking supplements. I'm on a diet. I'm like, this is like my entire existence. And then I had nothing to show for it. And you have all those questions, right? Of like, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right things? Or really in that moment, it's like, I'm not doing enough. I must not be doing the right things. I'm too old. I've waited too long. So it's like this letdown plus this like deep sense of like failure. And for me, it was also this moment of you're as much as I am trying to do all these things to be in somewhat control, you're not in control. And it's actually what is I am coming to terms as one of the hardest things of this process is the uncertainty and the lack of control that you have to really learn to cope with. And I can only imagine what you see in your practice. Um, and it was that moment of like, oh, I'm really not in control of this. And for me, it was also that moment of that first round where it doesn't work of like, what does this mean? Does this mean that like I'm going to be doing this forever? It's not going to work. It's not. So like all the stuff you attach to it, even though I know like this next round could be the round. I could be getting, I'm ovulating right now. We're trying. It could work. But in that moment, it is that first moment of this might not be working and it might not work in the way I'm hoping. And it was really, really, really tough. So I know I gave a long answer to that. I know you asked how I got through it, which
No, I think what you just shared is so important for people to hear because when people usually share their stories, they're on the other side.
yeah,
They've got their baby, they've got their pregnancy, and then it's easy to gloss over those hard, hard moments. But I mean, I think what people really need to hear is just what you shared, which is those moments where we have no answers. And I think what we see at Cala Collective as therapists is really this struggle where people, it's almost sometimes the first time I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. I'm eating right, I'm following my doctor's requirements and kind of recommendations, I'm doing acupuncture, I'm doing I'm waving feathers in the wind. I'm doing anything,
wearing a moonstone bracelet, which I talked to my mom through, my dead mom through. Like I'm doing all the things. Yeah.
everything, right? Everything. And and yet, what other part of our life do we do everything 100% correctly and then fail, to your point? Feel like we failed, not even have agency to change the outcomes at all. It's one of the few things in our life. And when you talk about uncertainty, I think it's so important, and we kind of gloss over uncertainty. And I always say, no, no, uncertainty is the most toxic form of anxiety. It's what created a mental health crisis with COVID, right? We just didn't know how long is this going to be? Like, how serious is this? And fertility struggles are the same thing. There's so much we don't know. Our doctors can't even answer it for us.
No.
And so we're sitting in these like the hardest moments
Yes,
a lot of the time.
a lot of the time. And there aren't clear answers a
No.
lot of the time. And the people that you're looking to for those clear answers, especially when they don't have them because there aren't. Well, it's your like for me, it's you're 43. This is it's kind of what we're dealing with here. So yeah, I would love people to be more prepared, and I'm sure you have to really support them through that, and it's why going to therapy is so important because the uncertainty and the waiting, it's such a waiting game.
It's such a waiting
You're
and
spending
holding.
so much time waiting, like you're pumping yourself up with these hormones and to get to this egg retrieval, and then you're waiting these weeks to see how many you can get, and then when you're doing IVF, how many fertilize, you have to wait that 24 hours, and then it's the 5 days to find out how many made it to blast, and then if you're doing genetic testing, it's 2 weeks for that. So it's just this constant waiting, and then if you're trying naturally, it's like waiting to ovulate and doing the tests and then waiting to see if you're pregnant. It's just waiting and waiting and such deep uncertainty. It really can get the better of you. And there have been moments where it has gotten the better of me.
And how do you support yourself in those moments where it takes over, it gets the better of you?
Yeah. I and I am this is where I am grateful. I hate that I had to go through it, that I went through a grief journey because there's a lot of similarities there. Um, is I find the uncertainties puts me into a place of spinning on the what ifs, what ifs, what ifs, what because no one's giving me a clear answer. So I'm just trying to answer it. Well, what if this and what if that? And what if I have to do 9 rounds? And what if I did wait too long? And what if and I ground myself in these are what ifs. They're not what is happening. So I have a few ways in which I do that, which is if I'm really spinning in a moment, I get myself as grounded in the present as I can just to stop that initial spin. So the tool that I use is to observe everything around me. So where am I? I'm at home in my office. Um, I'm talking to Batya. I can feel my hair on my face. I'm a little warm. So, and I get as specific as I need until I have landed here in the present. And then I go through a list of like, let's put those what ifs aside. What is? Not what if, what is? And oftentimes the what is has very little to do with those what ifs. Of like, do I have to go through 9 rounds? I've been through one. I've been through one round and I'm going to go through a second round. And I do know that. That's the what is. And I might not have to go through that second round because I'm trying right now to do it naturally. Maybe I'll get pregnant right now. And then if I'm really not able to believe what is, I'll let myself answer the what ifs. Okay, what if I have to go through 9 rounds? What does that look like? And I sort of force myself to face some of my fears. And oftentimes when I answer those things, I can handle them and they become tangible.
I mean, you're an excellent, I mean, you're doing all the work that we as therapists help people to do. So, like, good job. A plus, therapy patient.
I'm what ways do you, when people are dealing with the uncertainty and spinning, what's the advice you give them?
I mean, I think some of what you said is really important, and I'll add to that, the what ifs, and we all do it when we're going through a fertility journey and struggle, is the what if is the and intrusive thinking. And intrusive thinking is that example of the kind of the toxic anxiety, right? Because they're not really happening. They're just the fears of what could. So what you said, which is like, let's differentiate what's really happening versus what could happen, because what could happen isn't happening. So we start exactly where you said, what's happening right now? Where am I right now? And then I use a little bit of a train analogy. It's kind of like there's I don't know, like an engine and a caboose of a train, and there's these cars in between. So if we're at the end of the train and we want to get to the front, where are we right now? Okay. We are tracking ovulation. That's where I am right now. And then we let ourselves do a what if, but just for that next step. So, okay, I'm tracking ovulation. What's going to happen next? What if um, this cycle I don't get pregnant? Okay, so what comes next? We're going to have sex. We're going to try to get pregnant. I'm going to take a test. And if we're not pregnant, I'm going to call the reproductive endocrinologist. That's as big of a what if we can get to,
Okay.
because otherwise we're just starting to dysregulate and spin out of control. And then our anxiety is taking over. And then our cortisol levels spike. And then we're really in an activated state, which again is about just taking care of ourselves in these moments. It certainly doesn't help your fertility story, but more important than that, it doesn't help you as a person. And so taking care of yourself and regulating is so important. So
It's
that differentiation is like the biggest thing you can do.
the biggest thing. Yeah, I try. I will say, and I would love your take on this too, though, and it's part of how I got through it. I think there's also a balance of giving yourself grace and allowing yourself to feel all of the hard feelings and ask all of the questions. And part of how I got through those those days after I found out the round was unsuccessful. I mean, I got through that day, and then that evening it just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I leaned in. And luckily it was a Friday, and I let myself have the weekend to just have a full-on pity party and feel all the things I needed to feel and really process them and really lean into them and really be sad and ask the questions. And then I had an appointment with my doctor on Monday to talk about next steps. And that was my stop point of I let myself feel all those feels. And now, and it doesn't mean some of them didn't bleed through, but then it was time to focus on what was next. So I do leave room. I'm not always gaming myself out of the feelings. There are moments in which I just fully lean in so that I can feel them. Otherwise, they manifest later.
Good. You can't ignore your feelings. And the truth is, you have to see this as grief, to
Yes.
what you were referencing before. I mean, it's easy to understand grief as the loss of a person
Yes.
because that's what we know. Unfortunately, those are our experiences with grief, is the loss of a person or a being. Um, but grief is also the loss of a hope or a dream. And that's the confusing, more complicated grief because nobody around you is seeing it. And most of the time, we can ignore it ourselves, and yet it won't go away. It
Yes.
just then festers. And you have to grieve. And that's sometimes the most, it's kind of like we can't go around it, we can't go over it, we can't go under it, we just have to go through it.
Yes.
And you've got to go through it. You've got to give yourself permission to grieve and sit in it and get a little dirty in it because
Yes.
it's the only way through. It's the only way through, and the pain is awful, and yet it's the salve for getting to that next step and figuring out your resiliency. How do I stay strong in this? I have to feel it and experience it.
Yes. I love that. I love that because it is, yeah, I think along with it, when I was saying it's the series of waiting, if it's not going well, it's a series of grief,
Yeah.
of these little punctuation of grief moments and potentially a larger grief that, to your point, it's we don't often enough label that as grief. The grief of, the loss of all that time that I put in. I want to grieve that. The little embryo, the hope, the, how I thought it was going to go. I think there's even grief around identity of like grieving how I thought as a woman this was all going to go and it's going in a very different way and I need to honor that there's a little grief around that. And I think we also attach really negative connotations with grief, but I think grief is so important to move forward.
Yeah.
It's so important because if you don't grieve it, then you can't move past it. And
That's
to your
right.
point, you're always hanging on to it.
It doesn't go away if we don't give ourselves permission to grieve. And then what happens is it festers. It seeps through the cracks of everything else.
Yeah.
And we're feeling it in times we don't want to feel it, or we're reacting in ways that we wish we wouldn't be.
Yeah.
And again, people are scared of grief because of what it represents, right? But it's one of the most, unfortunately, natural processes we all go through.
Yeah.
And, one thing you were saying before about stress, which is, I think, related to this, is we can't be stress-free. I mean, it's impossible. We're gonna feel stress, but what we want to do is not try to eliminate stress, but try to become resilient. Because resiliency is the idea of being strong in hard times, getting through the hard stuff. So I'm grieving and I'm sitting in this, and I know I'm going to be able to get through this. I know I'm going to be bigger than this. I know I get to be other things besides just this.
Yeah.
And so I always tell people, forget about stress. You're going to be stressed. It's impossible not to be stressed. How can you go through this and not feel stress? You'd be sticking your head in the sand. But what we want to be is become resilient because that's going to be that superpower for the rest of your life, knowing you can get through hard things. It'll be the gift you'll use over and over again. And that's really how you get through the grief is this is hard and I can do hard things.
Yes. And in one of our earlier conversations, you had shared that with me, and I think it's so beautiful. And I wrote it. I like to something I do with my therapist. I write a lot of permission slips to
Yeah.
myself,
Okay.
and I added that as a permission slip because it was such a beautiful take on it. Because I have really been struggling with. I feel stressed, but then I feel stressed that I feel stressed. Yeah, I'm stressing about the stress because stress isn't good for my cortisol levels, which isn't. And you had really given me that permission slip of like, look, the stress isn't going to go away, and that's okay. It's how you move through it, and this idea of resiliency I have really held close to my heart. So I thank you for that because I think it's so true because there's also a lot of pressure to be strong. And there's a lot of pressure to be hopeful, which I want to have a whole discussion around hope.
Yes.
Um, there, hope
Yeah, it's a
has
little bit of a setup, isn't it?
many sides to it. Um, but I think the resiliency is really the one thing that you can lean into to get through it because it allows for the ebbs and flows. It allows for the grief. It allows for the hope, for the loss of the hope. But if you're resilient, you can keep moving through it. And it doesn't mean you always need to be strong or you always need to be hopeful. And you're not going to have hard times, but it's how you get on the other side of that. So I'm grateful to you for that because I've actually really been holding on to that.
Oh, I'm so glad that helped. I mean, I think that's one thing as a therapist in supporting people through fertility journeys. I get to be able to watch people find that resiliency and be able to move through the ups and downs of it. And sometimes that to me is one of the most beautiful parts of my work, that I get to watch people find those special moments because I know they'll use that for all the other parts of life that come to
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
So, I mean, as I think we're talking about the story, and I think what you've done, like I said, is so important, sharing the story as you're going through it, because it's so real, it's so authentic. And I think that's what really resonates with so many people is they're with you in it, whether they're experiencing it themselves or they just are rooting for you. They're in it with you, and it's not you're reporting after the fact.
Fascinated. This is entertaining.
But I think for so many people, you're the only other person outside of their own experience that they can see, oh, I'm not alone. So, I mean, what inspired you to share this? And what do you want people to take away from the story?
What inspired me to tell this story is the reason I always try to tell stories from my life is this is this is something that so many women go through, and yet it is just not spoken about enough. And because we're not speaking about it, it leaves so many women feeling so alone in this process. And then when you're alone in the process, all of those feelings of like, something is wrong with me, I'm a failure, how is this happening to me? And suddenly, when you open up the conversation and you crack open the doors to that community, that huge, huge, beautiful community of women who are going through it or have been through it, you don't feel alone. And suddenly you're like, oh, it's not just me. It's not wrong with me. This is this beautiful journey that so many people have been on. And I think because I have this platform from former times, I've always aimed to use this platform to help people feel less alone in their journeys. And for whatever reason, I feel oddly comfortable, very authentically sharing mine. But I think it has always been with the hope of helping other people feel less alone in their journey because my journey is unique to me, obviously, but it is so universal on so many ways. Like, I shared a lot about being single in my late 30s and meeting my person at 40 and getting married in my 40s and now sharing this. And I think, especially as women, I think we have so much pressure of the way that life is supposed to go. And we are so haunted by all of these shoulds. I call them the shoulds of, well, I should be getting married by this point. I should be having babies by this point. Having babies should go this way. It went this way for my mother and my sister and my best friend. And when we're not living up to that path we were supposed to take or the things we should be doing, you can feel like such a failure. You can feel so alone, even if you are actively making choices that you are thrilled about that have led you to this moment. If you're alone in that, it makes you question a lot. So even if I can help one person, and I know because I have access to them, it's a lot more than one person, feel less alone and know that what they're going through is not just normal, but awesome on so many levels, um, then me sharing this journey, I've accomplished my goal. And I think the secondary of that would be I still don't understand why this is a taboo topic. I just don't. It makes no sense to me. There should be no shame in talking about I think there's just been too much shame in sharing fertility struggles and fertility journeys. We went from growing up to believing like it was the stork, and then just you're trying not to get pregnant for so long. And then I think a lot of people, even if they don't end up in IVF, it's not as straightforward as you think. Um, but we're not supposed to talk about it. And there's so much of life I hope in me normalizing sharing it that other people will feel comfortable to share their stories too. And it's likely not going to be on social media, but maybe it's with their family to really share where they're coming from and the choices they've made, or their community, or their friends, or even just with themselves to rewire that narrative. And if I can help rewire that narrative, and for us to take some taboo as a society of talking about these things, because they're not shameful, they're beautiful, and it's human, and it's a human experience. So that is what inspired me in a long, verbose way.
It's amazing. I mean, what a gift, not just you're giving yourself, but taking responsibility for really giving it back even while you're going through it, which is incredible. And
Oh,
like I said before, really powerful. You're having such a powerful impact for other people.
thank you.
Um,
And they're having an impact on me.
that's
It is
right.
on a very selfish level.
Right.
I have the most incredible support network now because I've put my story out there, and it's why I want other women to like be able to share their stories. It's a club you don't sign up for, but man, is this club powerful and amazing. And the
And
women who have been through it before are going through it now, and like I feel lucky. Like I feel like I won the lottery of how many women I have access to that are holding me through this and are rooting for me and it is the greatest gift to myself I've ever given. So I'd be lying if I didn't say there's also a little bit of a self-serving part that I get to benefit from. And I'm so grateful. And all of you, please talk about it so you can also get that.
I mean, I think it's the lesson of we can't do it alone.
We
We
can't do it alone.
literally cannot do this alone, nor should we. And I think one of the things we're doing for this week in infertility awareness is having these conversations. We're encouraging other people to come up on the platform, share their story, or to your point, share it with somebody else, write it down, journal it. But it creates this collective experience so that it no longer feels like this kind of dark secret that we have to hold, or a shame that we're not a woman enough because we're experiencing this. Um, because for so many people, to your point, this is a universal experience for so many people, unfortunately. Um, and I hope that even in today's conversation, we're able to help people, encourage people to hear your story, encourage people to look for support. It's one of the reasons we created Cala Collective was people were saying, well, I need support around this specific area. And so we exclusively support reproductive mental health. And so many people come to us, they're like, we didn't even know this was a thing.
I
Because
didn't know it was a thing until I met you.
I mean, because you need people that can say you don't have to explain what IVF is. You don't have to explain to me what mixing your Menopur vial is. We got it, and we actually will help you figure out how to navigate this complex system. And again, it's just another way of bringing a tribe, expanding your tribe, in that theme of we have to build a support system.
You have to. And it's where I am just such an unbelievable fan of what you are doing. And it is so needed because it's the physical part and the medical part is so overwhelming. And you go to these clinics and they're most of them, I think some are starting to lean into the emotional part a bit better, but these doctors, their job is to get you an outcome. And to be honest, that's what I want my doctor focused on.
That's right. That's what you're paying for.
Um,
Insurance is paying for is like, let's
yeah,
make a baby.
absolutely. And to know that you have this emotional, mental support that gets it, that knows it, that's all you do. And to your point, like I don't need to explain the menopause shots. I don't need to explain like if I'm heading into that waiting period, you know exactly how to support me on that. And it is so necessary. You cannot, I mean, look, you can choose, but I would not recommend going through this without support. And to have a, a licensed therapist that is just focused on this, what a gift. What a gift you're giving.
Thank you. And I think, you know, we, I think as both a therapist and somebody that's also had a fertility story, it's the same thing is you want to really share what you can do and how you can support people. But I mean, I think hopefully today in this conversation, we've been able to both share and also support other women who are hearing this and make them feel connected to the experience and hopefully think about some ways they can support themselves and tap into their support system.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Allie. This has been so amazing
So
and
amazing. I
yeah,
know.
I'm
I feel
excited
like we could
to
just chat for hours.
I
Hopefully we'll do
know.
more of these.
Yeah, I would
But
love
thank
that.
you for all the work you're doing. It's really, it's just incredible. So
And thank you. I mean, I think your story has been so inspirational, and I hope it continues to inspire women. And I hope that we get to celebrate your next story, next stage 3.
next stage three. Yes.